The American School of Power Building doesn't believe in overcomplication. Their formula is simple and raw. Pack as much horsepower as humanly possible under the hood and let the rear tires burn. In the modern automotive world, there is no greater physical manifestation of this terrifying philosophy than Cadillac's legendary beast, the CT5-V Blackwing. This masterpiece represents the last stand of high-performance engineering, pairing a manual transmission with the brutal roar of a supercharged V8. However, the machine we are looking at today didn't roll off a pristine showroom floor. It was dragged from the depths of a salvage auction after a violent collision left its front end completely obliterated, leaving it as a mangled heap of metal destined for the scrapyard. At first glance, saving this monster seemed like a complete impossibility. The front end was a chaotic mess of twisted structural steel, though the side profiles and rear remained completely untouched. The biggest shock of all was that the heart was still beating, the engine could fire up, and the car was actually capable of moving under its own power. Right then, a suicide mission was born in the minds of the build team. They weren't just going to restore it to factory spec, they were going to strip away its refined DNA and mutate it into a fire-breathing, tire-shredding drift weapon. The teardown began the moment the silver wreck entered the fully equipped shop. Hands flew fast, ripping away the jagged remnants of the ruined front bumper and unbolting the warped hood to expose the true depth of the damage. The immediate priority was clearing the path to the cooling system, pulling out the punctured radiator and AC condenser to make room for a total structural overhaul. This journey was never about basic body repair. It was an absolute rewrite of how this luxury heavyweight behaves on a track race. As the mangled body panels hit the shop floor, the team's pre-planning paid off. A massive shipment of fresh parts had already arrived at the shop. While some components matched the car's factory black paint perfectly, other hard-to-find parts, like the front fenders, had to be sourced in different colors. It didn't matter, because this machine was headed toward a visual transformation that would make everyone forget what a stock Cadillac even looked like. Rebuilding the front chassis of a car that took a massive high-speed impact is delicate work, especially when you plan to unleash over 900 horsepower through that very frame. Precision alignment down to the millimeter is the difference between a car that carves through corners and one that snaps violently into a wall the second you bury the throttle. With the wreckage cleared away, the new fenders and upgraded headlights were temporarily test-fitted to inspect the panel gaps and check the vehicle's structural lines. The next step was a brilliant display of lightweight engineering. A brand new hood made entirely of dry carbon fiber was dropped into place, instantly giving the front end a sinister, aggressive face. Fortunately, the initial measurements showed that the structural clearances were spot on. The chassis hadn't suffered major twisting, meaning the team was spared from grueling frame-pulling sessions. But the real heavy-duty fabrication was just getting started behind those clean exterior panels. To guarantee maximum rigidity and prevent the chassis from twisting under the massive torque of the upgraded V8, the work shifted to a laptop. The team designed a fully custom front crash bar and structural reinforcement setup. The idea wasn't to throw on generic aftermarket replacement brackets, but to fabricate a heavy-duty steel cage capable of protecting the supercharged engine while surviving the absolute worst abuse of professional drifting. Using precision metal cutters and TIG welders, the digital design was transformed into physical reality, using thick-walled steel tubing welded into a single, rigid structure. This custom crash bar served as the new skeleton of the front end, welded directly onto the strongest structural points of the factory frame. With the reinforced brace locked in place, they mounted a custom upper radiator support, laying down the foundation for a brutal, bulletproof front end. Underneath the newly fitted carbon fiber hood sat a true mechanical titan, a 6.2-liter supercharged V8, the same iconic power plant shared with track weapons like the Chevrolet Corvette Z06 and the Camaro ZL1. From the factory, this engine pumps out a massive 670 horsepower and 890 newton-meters of torque, more than enough to vaporize the rear tires in Gear 1. But for a dedicated drift build, those numbers were merely the baseline. The quest for extreme power began by unbolting the massive supercharger from the top of the V8 block and shipping it out to a highly specialized engineering firm. The goal was simple but complex to execute: port the supercharger housing, shave off rotational weight, and optimize airflow efficiency to shove maximum boost into the combustion chambers. When the supercharger returned to the shop, it looked like a polished work of art, lighter, highly efficient, and ready to force-feed the engine massive amounts of air. While the supercharger was being modified, the team opened up the engine block to get to the cylinder heads. The heads underwent professional porting and polishing to maximize fuel and airflow, while the stock valves were swapped for heavy-duty race-grade units, designed to withstand the extreme heat and pressure of a high-boost setup. Even the valve covers were replaced with aggressive, custom-fabricated units to match the raw, mechanical look of the new engine bay. Every single mechanical component was meticulously bolted back together, verifying clearances to prevent any vacuum leaks or timing issues. The integration of the modified engine parts was flawless. Once fully assembled, the engine bay didn't just look like a powerhouse, it looked like a show car centerpiece, seamlessly blending aesthetic perfection with the promise of pure, unadulterated violence. Generating massive power is half the battle. Managing the weight of a luxury cruiser that tips the scales at nearly 2 tons is another. A crucial weight reduction move was tearing out the heavy, complex factory fuel tank and replacing it with a lightweight race-grade fuel cell mounted inside the trunk. This setup keeps the fuel delivery completely stable under the violent side-to-side G-forces of high-angle drifting. To replace the dozens of broken plastic brackets and structural clips lost in the crash, the team turned to modern tech, utilizing a 3D printer to fabricate custom parts on the fly. This saved days of waiting for back-ordered OEM parts and ensured a perfect fit. Underneath the car, the drivetrain received a massive upgrade. The heavy steel driveshaft was tossed into the bin, replaced by a custom-molded carbon fiber driveshaft. This incredibly expensive piece of engineering reduces rotational mass, allowing the engine to snap its power to the rear wheels instantly. With the mechanical plumbing complete and a custom-fabricated straight-pipe exhaust system fitted to let the V8 scream, the Cadillac was lowered from the lift. The fuel cell was filled to check for leaks, and because almost every variable of the engine's air and fuel intake had changed, the team hooked up their tuning laptops to reflash the ECU and prepare the engine for its first start. The first start of a ground-up build is always a high-tension moment. The first turn of the key met some hesitation as the new electronic systems calibrated. But on the second attempt, the sleeping giant roared to life with a deafening bark that shook the shop walls. The raw, supercharged V8 idle filled the room, proving that every hour spent over the welding masks and under the chassis had paid off.